Mac McCarthy, and I help people with their breakups and other things too. Today, we've got an interesting topic: love bombing, lies, and labels. And there's a reason why I put them in that order. But this is one of those topics that comes up in live coaching sessions. And full disclosure, I didn't really know what the term love bombing was till, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago. I don't know what it was. I definitely know what someone means by it. I didn't know what the label was that was out there now on YouTube or one of these other things that we've created these labels for things that fit neatly. Oh, I've been love bombed. I'm sorry, what is that? I've never heard of it. You've never heard of love bombing? No. What is it? So actually, I think it was on a live stream, and the great Pete that comes on the live stream quite a bit was like, well, it's the equivalent of when you say 0 to 100 in the beginning of a relationship. And so recently, I just had a live coaching session with a woman last night. It was almost one of these urgent live coaching sessions where I got a message on Instagram, and I'll reply on Instagram. I'll talk to someone, but a lot of times someone through Instagram will be extremely urgent. I need your help right now. And this was the case last night. And it's sometimes for me, I'm like, it's a bit of a red flag, because it means that they're looking for a really quick fix. And I'm like, well, did you write your story? This, that, and the other. Ask some other questions. I'm like, all right, caught me at a good time. Let's talk about it. And usually I don't like to talk at night because I go to sleep early compared to a lot of other people. And so I was up till 11:30 and ended up talking to this individual for 2 hours. So Clutch, who just came on, says, how do you not know of love bombing? I just don't know the label, the term. I know of it from the channel. What people don't realize is I do breakup coaching. I do my channel. I give people my take on stories. These labels that have been created, I don't comb the internet with this kind of stuff. So once someone describes what it is, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. Sure. I haven't heard that term before, right? And it seems now that these terms have, it's a clinical term. Wow, okay. So again, I'll admit when I'm not sure of something, right? So like I said, months ago, this was mentioned, like Pete's like, well, it means this. I'm like, all right, I've heard it before. So I wrote out some notes today as I was having my breakfast at my usual coffee shop. Man, some places are going out of business, man. This thing's messed up. It's like, I'm like, my usual, which I get, 3 eggs, banana honey crepe, some mango. They're out of everything. It's like, oh, we got to go down the street because we don't have that many customers, so we just buy the food as people come in. It's like, what? Anyhow, so love bombing, lies, and labels. First of all, you'd have to ask yourself what your definition of love bombing is as an individual. But I would say the way it was referred to me in the language that I use is 0 to 100. In other words, someone's giving you compliments, saying really nice things you want to hear. You feel validation, you feel good, you feel great, you feel wonderful. And you might even feel a little off at first, but I mean, is there anyone that doesn't like a compliment, let alone even a cheap compliment? Even if you're going to bat someone away, right? Even the beautiful woman that hears it 5 times a day that she's gorgeous, or I don't even know if guys still whistle or do something like that. It still feels good, right? It's not necessarily a good tactic to get a highly secure person. But I think that this idea that someone starts out giving you compliments and praise and compliments and praise. And I think where it goes really bad is when you get in a fight or something goes wrong and it looks like it's not going to work out, and then they just love bomb you with just compliments and how much they love you and how much they want to be with you. Dot, 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 dot. But to me, probably the reason why I didn't know a whole lot about this, and like I said, again, I don't know the term, but I know what people are talking about. And this is why write out your story and send it into writemac.com, and we'll comb through it and unpack it like I did last night for over 2 hours with this woman, and put the labels aside for a moment. Okay, you could use labels and whatnot, because the minute, it was funny last night, the minute I said, oh, this is love bombing, huh? She went, yeah, her eyes lit up. And she felt like, yeah, like she had been watching videos, about this particular topic. And another client of mine about 3 weeks ago had mentioned that she had been love bombed. And so, you always reflect back on your own life and you think, okay, was there a time that I've felt like, and for me, I had a few instant thoughts of women that I dated or saw or hooked up with that I could say maybe applied to this. And it repelled me. I mean, I thought to myself, thank you. But it's just too much. It comes off disgenuine. But why, the question would be, why does it work? Because it works. I was thinking of this. It works especially for some men. But who does it work especially well for? This is what I've noticed in a few coaching sessions that I've had where women are really entangled with a guy that has lied to them and love bombed them repeatedly, almost in a combination, right? And you think to yourself, instantly you would say something like, oh, she probably has daddy issues, or, oh, she's probably insecure. But what if that's not the primary case? I think when love bombing works at its best is if the person that's love bombing you is attractive. If they're a highly attractive individual, if they're an 8 or 9, 10 on your Richter scale, and let me just tell you this. 2 past clients I've had that were highly entangled with a love bomber, as it is labeled, and a consummate liar. I don't know if love bombing and lying go hand in hand, but it seems like it's a deadly combination. Anyhow, one of the things that came up right away is that they're highly attracted to these people. And it's not because of the comments, it's physical attraction. So when I go through, I don't do this all the time, but when I'm trying to get a read, I go, out of 1 to 10, what's your attraction? Out of 1 to 10, what's your connection? Out of 1 to 10, what's your trust? And the individuals that were still entangled with a love bomber, a liar, and we might even just throw in these cases, narcissist, which I don't use commonly, right? And you're like, how are you still into this person? And then you go, what's your attraction level? 12, 10, and they light up. Because let me ask you this, and put it in the comments below. Why does it work? Well, it works exceptionally well if someone wants to believe those comments from someone that's highly attractive that they think might be possibly out of their league, or, one of the more attractive persons they've hooked up with. Then it works really nice, right? It works really nice. Betas tend to be the love bombers when it comes to guys. Do you think that's true, Clutch, that you would attach a guy being bait? Because just for example, The two guys that I'm talking about, and I don't know them. These are coaching sessions that I've had with individuals that were dating guys that love bombed them. They definitely weren't described in a way that I would say that they were beta. If anything, they were alphas. Maybe alpha, So, do you think that would be exclusive to that? What's up, Jen? If lying advances the love bombing, I'm sure it's part of the picture for some. Well, that's the other thing. Why does love bombing work? Why does it work? Well, just like anything else, it's a craft that someone can perfect. And once they find it works for them and they get results and they get a reward from it, they'll use it again. And I was just thinking back when I was writing out these notes this morning and just kind of reflecting on this topic, I was thinking to myself, do I have any friends that use this as a tactic? Right? Like, is this something that I remember friends doing? And I instantly thought of two guys that went to my high school that they weren't in my immediate group of close friends, but we knew each other, right? We all knew, you in high school you have like your friends and then your extended friends or people you just known for years, whatnot. The guys that I thought of immediately were consummate liars. And guess what? Both of the guys I thought about that were like this got a lot of women. I mean, they always had a new girlfriend in high school. And they were well known for telling whoppers. And just, about themselves and about things. And I just was thinking to myself, wow, there's something to that. But I'm sure that love bombing works on some individuals more than others due to timing. If I've noticed that, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but if someone's been in a dry spell or they haven't dated much, and this is coming up a lot recently. I've talked to a lot of people that they're kind of sheepishly saying, I haven't hooked up with someone in 2 years, or I haven't dated in this long, and it's just very common right now. And maybe it's partly because of the pandemic, but it's also partly because just the way I think things are evolving, that individuals that have a good job, that have food and shelter, and live alone and seem independent, secure, and strong to society as a whole, they've had a few bad experiences via breakup or just bad dates, and they just packed it in. And they just took a break that ended up being a year, 2 years, 3 years. And what I always say to them is like, give yourself a break and you can start back in the game anytime you want. And I just had a client a couple days ago that it's been 4 years. 4 years. And he's in his late 20s. And he was saying that his dad was like, look, man, just tell me the truth. Are you gay? And he started laughing, right? And this guy's in no way gay, or does he, believe he has any questions about that. He's just gotten really comfortable with not trying. And he made some jokes about it and whatnot. And so he's finally, it's been 4 years, and he had come to me out of the breakup. I guess it was 4 years ago, right when I started. And he just never got back into the game. And so now he was going, you know what? I'm thinking about asking this girl out. And it was a friend's wife's sister, if you follow that. And so I think he got the number, he got her Instagram from his friend, and he sent her a message like, hey, here's my number, give me a call sometime. So he hit me back and he wanted to talk to me about this. And I said, you just got to ask her out. Yeah, but I've been a little rusty. I said, it doesn't matter from the feedback I get from women, anything you read about this, that, you're better off swinging at the plate than getting struck out looking at the pitch. And I'm like, right now you're not even taking a swing. But this evidently is more common. I mean, this is more common now that men, especially young guys that I talk to, do this. They're like, oh, I just got an Instagram, and then I told her to give me a call. My niece, I've talked about this before, it's 25, 26, said it happens to her all the time. Oh, take down my Instagram and give me a call sometimes. I'm like, unless it's Brad Pitt or something like that, I don't think there's going to be a high percentage of women that, even if they like you, want to make that call. But I think there's a lot of guys out there, because there's been so much lack of interaction with other human beings that they quote unquote feel rusty or not in it. So they're just like, oh, I'll just throw my name out there and my number, and then maybe they can call me back. So to me, what's the odds of a woman calling you back? What do you think, Jen? You're an expert. Let's see here. Clutch says this can be, we can't talk about it, but I don't think chatting would do it justice. It's just a deep talk. Chicks dig the long ball or an attempt to swing and hit the long ball. Yeah, it's just, 100% women inherently won't make the first move. Yeah, and I've had women that I've dated show interest and make it very apparent that they wanted to date me, right? Or I've even had in one case a woman that ended up being my girlfriend, who was highly secure. She was approached a lot. She was good looking, and but conservative. She told a lot of guys no to go out to dinner and have a drink. She ended up asking me, hey, did you want to ride home? Right? After we started talking. But here's the thing. We had a lot of human interaction. Right? If a woman's going to make the move, which isn't, in the stat sheet as most likely to happen, if they are, it's going to be if you have human interaction, not you dropping a number or a text. I just don't think that that's going to get the juices flowing. I think that when I was younger and you had a job, or you were, different places like that, and you were mingling with a woman regularly, she might get a crush on you or like you and might make a stronger move, right? What's a solid green light, Jen? I would just like to give your take on what is a solid green light. And here's the funny thing. The amount of women that talk to me that tell me they wish the guys would be more bold, take more initiative, be more of a leader. And so to me, even if you get rejected, she'll still respect you more, and maybe down the road would go out with you in the future. Let me see my notes here. Love bombing, the 2-hour topic, huh? How about this? Do you think when someone's love bombing that they know that they're doing it? In other words, that it's some kind of tactic that they're using that they have in their head, or do you think that they're unconsciously doing it? I would say most probably just unconsciously do it. And the reason they do it is it's worked for them before. And you have to ask yourself, when does a compliment feel like bullshit? Right? Have you gotten a compliment before and you're like, yeah, that's bullshit? On the other hand, if you feel like a compliment's bullshit, you might just be so insecure that you can't take a compliment. I've met people like that before, where it's like anything you say, they're like, yeah, right, it's not true, I suck. Here's a really good question on this topic. Does a secure person fall for love bombing? If a person is supremely secure, will they fall for love bombing? I think they could. I believe that with all this generalization now on the internet, it really pissed me off a couple days. Yesterday I was watching a really good conversation between Jordan Peterson and Michael Malice. I don't know a whole lot about Michael Malice, and I'm not a person that knows, all of Jordan Peterson's content or anything like that. But it was a good conversation. Two smart, intelligent guys with different points of view and different things. But this is just an example of what goes on, where this is a difference in Jordan Peterson and someone like Michael Malice. Michael Malice, he kind of does things with intelligence and humor, but then he throws in. But then he'll throw in something to be cute or funny that takes away from his argument. But yesterday he's like basically talking about the problems with school and university. So you'd think I would be biased being a teacher for over 10 years, right? Because I've heard this question, like, what do you think about schools? What do you think about, and I don't think people need to go to university. I don't, this about education, that, it's all fucking generalizations. So he drops in one of his arguments, yeah, kids go to school to be taught by a mediocre person. Excuse me? So he basically, what he's saying is that all teachers are mediocre, right? All teachers are mediocre. He just throws that in, he just weaves that into his statement to a national audience. This is what's wrong. And then people go, oh, yeah, that's true. There's billions or millions of teachers in the world, and you're going to say that they're all mediocre? Wow. Wow. By the way, you've never done the job. You went to school. I went and looked him up afterwards. He went to university. So he probably had a couple bad experiences, or had a couple bad teachers, and now he knows they're all mediocre. And by the way, if the teacher's mediocre, what are you? Getting back to the love bombing topic. I believe that, I was saying this to someone in a live coaching recently, everyone's capable of meeting their match. I don't mean meeting your match in the sense of Match.com or who you're going to marry. I mean it in the sense that if you're a player, if you're a pickup artist, or you have a really strict code you go by through dating, right? Or the love bomber, who, to me, if you really were going to use this love bombing as a label a lot, you'd have to put it into subcategories. The covert love bomber, the attractive love bomber, the desperate love bomber. Okay? Here's what I've noticed, though. People that have been love bombed, their relationships usually don't last long. There's a lot of drama. And the person that love bombs is just as capable of breaking up with you on a whim. And there's nothing worse than getting in an argument with a partner or a disagreement, and someone goes for the kneecaps and goes, you know what, I'm just done. What? I wanted to argue about this. I wanted to have a discussion about this. You want to break up over it? And then in that moment, if the other person overcompensates and go, no, don't break up with me, they instantly win the argument. They instantly get their way, right? And I think it's similar with love bombing. It's a overcompensation. You're overcompensating. You're saying, I want this so bad, I'll do whatever it takes. But I think love bombing is not simple to one type of person, right? And a couple cases recently with these coaching sessions I've had, one thing that stood out, there were younger women in their mid to late 20s that were with guys that they were highly attracted to. I mean, when I ask, are you attracted to them, their eyes lit up. Highly attracted to them. And then sprinkle in good intimacy. If you have good intimacy, high attraction, and love bombing, ooh, that's a cocktail. No pun intended. Right? Think about that. Now, do you think, in all your knowledge, Clutch, about love bombing, do you believe that it's more common for a man to love bomb a woman than a woman to love bomb a man? And has anyone that's on the live stream now, we got 7 on deck, 3 likes. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Chuckster, you're wonderful. Rob, Guardian of the Gate, Jen. Has anyone here has had a love bombing story where you caught it early on and you went, you know what, there's something fishy here and I'm not buying it. This is just too much too quick. Right? There can be a fine line between love bombing and someone being genuinely open with their feelings. I had a case before where I was casually seeing a woman, dating, what have you. I wasn't all in. And then she seemed like pretty chill, not attached, not over the top. And then we had this conversation and it was like, I know who you are. I'm like, okay, I know who I am too, you know, but I really know who you are. You've been through a lot in your life, but then sprinkled in a lot of compliments. You're not an ordinary person. You're highly intelligent. You're like, and I was thinking to myself, oh, I like that. No, thank you. You know, like in my head. But it felt almost like she was trying to play psychic, but with compliments. But on the other end of it, it threw me back because I was like, where's this headed? Like, what are all these compliments? And Jen might be saying, well, maybe they were just being open with their feelings about you. But at the same time, it was early on at a casual point in the relationship where we just started dating, and it was a little too much. And it was also, to me, I was like, I don't think you know me as well as you think you know me, right? It was kind of one of those things where it was, I'm telling you who you are, and in a complimentary way, because I've observed this about you, and I'm like, okay, can we just have some fun? You want to call in on Skype, Clutch? I don't know how much time I'm going to go today, though. Let's do it. Clutch, you're a real night owl, aren't you? Let's do it. Roller girl, I've been waiting for you. You're the most beautiful roller girl in the world. Topic's love bombing. I think insecure love bombers probably have less success, probably. Let's see here. It could be, Jen. It could be. I wouldn't say you're wrong. I wouldn't say you're wrong. I wouldn't say you're wrong. Before I call you Clutch, let me just read off what I wrote here, because I don't have much, but these are things to chew on. So, does a secure person fall for love bombing? Is love bombing a lie to just get what you want, a cheap sales job, a tactic, or in the moment, do they feel that? When does love bombing really work? When a person is attractive, I think it's more highly effective. You want to believe this person is into you. Now mix in good intimacy. I mentioned this earlier. Only once they have you, you yearn for more of that attention. But I wrote, no relationship can be 2 years of love bombing, right? It's always going to taper off at some point. If you didn't have the phrase love bombing, what would you call it? Because love bombing hasn't been around forever, right? So what would we call it? Charming, smooth, over the top would be one. Too much. Have you ever met a great salesperson? Is something else I meant to bring up. Someone that's really good in sales. I've met a few. And is it similar to what someone's doing in love bombing? I find that when someone gets done with a love bomber, they're bitter, they're upset, they call them a narcissist, they call them a liar, but what is it you really want from them? What is it you really want from them? If you've been victim to a really good love bomber and you're upset with them and you're pissed off, I've noticed this, that they're pissed. They feel like they've been duped. They've been fooled. What do you want from them? You know what I wrote? Is it possible that you want those love bombing moments back when they were giving you the compliments? Those are some things to chew on in the chat. I'll tell you what's a struggle today. My air conditioning's out. It's about high 80s with high humidity. I was like, why does it feel like I'm in a hurry to get done? That's why. Let's see here. Oh, it's not coming in right away. Hold on. It's always weird. There you go, bud. Hello?
Hey, dude. You got me?
Yep, you're live.
Excellent.
All right, so drop it.
It's like drop the mic, Clutch. Let's hear it.
Let's hear your layers of love bombing. I'm open ears. Let's hear it.
Love bombing has different interpretations based on different personality traits. So, for the most part, when you hear the term love bombing, and yes, it is a clinical term, what it's referring to is specifically referring to cluster B personality disorders. So when you're love bombing in that aspect, with the exception of one type of personality, for the most part, it is a subconscious, emotionally driven reaction. So if I love bomb you, what is most likely happening is I, at a subconscious level, am so afraid of losing this connection that I feel I have to go over the top in order to keep that connection built. Because for the most part, most cluster B individuals have grown up in a household where love wasn't secure. So the immediate gratification of an emotion like limerence, for example, is I'm feeling the love or the affection I lacked in early childhood. So my immediate reaction is to try to lash on to that as quickly as possible. And depending on the type of personality that you happen to be, there are certain personalities that need to latch on to another person in order to survive, because by definition, the way that they view themselves is an extension of someone else. It's almost it's a very parasitic lifestyle. So by love bombing and by creating that enmeshment, that emotional dependency, I increase my chances of maintaining a strong connection early on. So that's one aspect, but we can get into the others as well.
Let me interject and ask a couple questions. So,
Sure.
First of all, in regards to, from the outside in, there's some guys that love bombing. I mean, there's a craft to it, right? About it, but guys that it works for. Let's just stick with the guy thing, because this is a couple of the clients I've had recently that it works for. I mean, is it going to work for everyone, or does it have to be packaged in a certain way and have to be with a certain other person on the other end to accept that? And is it more likely, like what I said, if the person's attractive? Is it more likely to work?
Well, I mentioned this in the chat. I don't think necessarily that it's an attractive person that does it, but I do think that if it's done right, it can build a high sense of attraction. So it sort of becomes a question of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Was this always a chicken, or did it come in the form of an egg and then grew into a chicken? Love bombing has different interpretations on who you're dealing with. If we're talking about strictly the clinical aspect of it, we tend to be talking about cluster B. And in that aspect, that's something completely different. But if you're talking about your average Joe Schmo that loves bombs, which does happen, It does happen a fair bit, actually. In those particular cases, I find what you're mainly dealing with there is a level of insecurity, or in an extreme case, which is usually something that's associated with the person that they happen to be dating at the time. It's incredibly common for love bombs to happen when you're dealing with two people that are of the opposite attachment. So this is usually really common with individuals that are really anxious, that are dating extreme events, for example. Well, so again, we're talking about two separate topics. That's why I said, look, there's so many layers to it that I wouldn't define love bombing as one universal thing.
So you're saying that
for that reason,
you could subtopic into love bombing with avoidance and anxious specifically, and talk about that where that's going to be more susceptible to just thinking about it right now. Someone with the anxious personality or attachment theory, whatever you want to call it, with a secure or an avoidant, this would line up for them. So the person that's most susceptible is the insecure, anxious person?
I don't say they're more susceptible to it, but I would say they're probably talk more frequently. Like an avoidant will be very quick to love bomb as well. It doesn't just become the anxious person love bombing the avoidant. Sometimes it's the opposite, is the dependency that's built from it. So I've met avoidants who were very quick at saying, I love you. I've dated avoidants who have been very quick at saying, I love you. But as soon as they're triggered, and usually that trigger has to do with the return of the affection. So if you say, I love you, and then I say, I love you back, that's when it starts really affecting someone's psyche and they start pulling away. But love bombing is really a unique characteristic because, and again, this is why I said we should probably talk about it a little more. I find that love bombing is a phenomenon that has become more frequent in the last 10 to 20 years. Not because I believe cluster B is on the rise, but because I feel human beings in general are constantly seeking connection with other people at a deep and intimate level. And as technology rises, as human interpersonal relationships demise, and as relationships just become less and less authentic, there seems to be this necessity to connect emotionally with people as quickly as possible. And I attribute that to being the reason why love bombing is so common now.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Have you had specific incidents where you've been love bombed yourself?
I have been love bombed and I have love bombed different parts of my life. So
Full
the
disclosure.
aspect is, look, full disclosure, you know me, man. I'm very quick to admit my own flaws. I try to be. It's just that, look, if I have to refer back to the time I love bombed,
All right.
looking back on it, I legitimately felt I was in love
Well, could
with
you
enough
say a little
time
bit
and
about it?
space.
How old were you and what happened?
I was in my, I would say, early 20s. And it was actually, at the time, it ended up being my first fiance. It was a case where it was my first relationship, or at least first serious relationship. And I felt like, and this is when I was going through my avoidance stage, I felt that I had to maintain a societal standard of how far we had to have been in the relationship at that time. And, up to that point, like I had some success, I had flings here and there, but that was my first serious long-term relationship. So there was this necessity to try to fit in to the standard norm. Like what is the right time to say I love you? And I really didn't have an answer for that. I didn't have the experience for it. So in that aspect of things, yeah, like I probably said it too quickly. Now, did that relationship fall apart because of it? No, it didn't. But I was also dating a very secure person at the time. Fast forward to other people I've dated, we talked about my ex in Santa Monica. With her, it was a case of any kind of intimacy to that level would have sent her running to the hills. So it's a case of it was different situations and different times.
Sure.
And of course, different aspects. And the times that I've been love bombed, that was with my narcissistic ex. But even then, the love bombing doesn't necessarily have to be the words "I love you."
Sure.
Especially as a man. What it tends to be more as a man is when a girl or a woman, if we want to be PC here, tends to tell you something like, "You make me feel safe," or there's a very deep emotional connection. Like I'm of the belief, and I don't know what your take is on this, Mac. The moment that a woman tells you she feels safe with you is probably the deepest emotional connection she'll ever have with you. But that's my opinion.
And you're saying that if she divulges what you just said as being basically the pinnacle, her saying that she's, because I would say that I know what you mean by that statement, and I know the significance of it, especially now after interacting, a lot of feedback on their experiences in life. And I mentioned this.
You're set for life, Mac.
I mentioned this prior on the live stream, is that the amount of women that have had incidents with men where they don't feel safe, right? That that have influenced them to be weary, to be, so I know what you mean by that. But on the flip side, that being the pinnacle, at what point does it, if a woman says that, that's not necessarily love bombing, it's just a matter of when it's said, the timing of it?
Yeah, sure. Like I've had women tell me that after a week of dating.
I feel safe with you.
Which I consider way too fast. Like that's like for something, like I've talked about this on my channel. Like the act of lovemaking.
Okay.
Is probably the most vulnerable position a woman can be in her day-to-day life.
Okay.
Because at any moment, like you can literally pull a knife and slash your throat. Not saying you're going to do it, but the physical act of lovemaking increases that vulnerability. So in order for lovemaking to be possible, or even love to be possible, there has to be an element of safety. And like you've talked to just as many women as I have about this. Safety, I would say, is the number one, if not the number two priority in most women when they look for a potential mate. So the idea of love bombing, and again, this is a subcategory. We're strictly concentrating on insecure people. Um, the aspect of making someone feel safe, or saying you make me feel safe, when that rapport hasn't been built yet, when that trust hasn't had legitimate foundation structure to it, that's something that can be very enticing as a man, because like as men, we're the providers. We try to protect and we try to provide. And the moment that someone comes to us and essentially flatters us and says, "Hey, I feel safe with you," that's an aspect of it can be very ego grooming, especially if you happen to be an insecure guy. Because if you've had zero success with women, and I'm using a hypothetical here, you've had zero success with women, and all of a sudden this woman that you find attractive comes to you and thinks the world of you and says she feels safe with you, like that feels fulfilling. And it can be chemically very addictive. So you have to be very aware of the types of people you're going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis, especially now coming out of the quarantine, because like I've noticed this through my Discord. The dating pool has never been this concentrated before. So there's a lot of
What do
people
you? I'm
coming
sorry
out
to
of this.
interject. What do you mean by the dating pool being more concentrated? What do you mean by that statement?
People are more eager to go out and connect with others.
Okay.
So there seems to be this urgency to like go out and connect with people as quickly as possible.
Would you mean? Do you mean that in a way of just connection, or do you mean that in a romantic or physical way, or just both?
I would say just both. It's like all of a sudden. Well, think about it. Like all of a sudden, couples that were forced to spend quarantine together, like they probably hate each other, and like we had predicted last year, divorce rates are up, separation rates are up,
Yeah.
and then God forbid if people were spending this entire time in quarantine single, all of a sudden there's this eagerness to go out and connect with many people. Like I was laughing at some of the dating profiles I've been seeing here in California. I don't know if it's the same over there in Thailand, but people literally put on their profile vaccinated. So it's just like it's
That makes
become
sense.
social. Yeah. It's become
Oh
a
my
social
God. It makes
norm.
sense.
Yeah,
It makes sense. I mean, I'm not
yeah.
surprised. I mean, it's funny when you said that. It's laugh out loud funny, but I mean, like at the same time, like I, it's sadly funny, but yeah, I could totally see that. Jeez. I'm vaccinated also. It sounds like something of your pet on a profile.
Oh, not to throw anyone under the bus here, and I hope no one that's watching is in this situation, but it's like those people that type in that they have a VD on their dating profile. It's just like part of me understands why you would put that there, but I'm just like TMI. Like, hey, build my rapport first, get to know me a little bit better, and then open up about it. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't work out, that sucks for everyone involved. But like the whole aspect of this quarantine and what it's done to people's psyche is really funny to me, because there have been two extremes. There have been the people that have taken this time to work on themselves and develop, and I'm very proud of those people. And there have been other people that have sort of doubled down and sort of said, I need to find someone as quickly as possible. I don't care what it takes. Power to you, but this is such a waste of opportunity. And people are throwing out these terms like vaccinated, saying like, hey, it's permission for me to go out and be irresponsible again. And it's just like, guys, like, let's dial it back a step or two, a peg or two, and let's try to reflect on this experience.
Yeah, it's gonna be it's definitely gonna change things. And I do think, you brought up an interesting point indirectly, in the sense that love bombing is going to have more of an effect with someone based on their history of who they've been with and their experience. I was just talking, this is just the case with someone I talked to yesterday. I'm like, how many people have you been with before, and what were your relationships like before, prior to this love bomber? And, and if they've never met someone like that before, it can be really refreshing and nice and sweet and great, because your last relationship, you never got any attention like that. And so that's when it becomes very effective for someone. And like I said before, I think that there's a lot of cases where Also, if it works in the beginning of the relationship where the guy, let's just say if it's a guy, gets positive feedback from it, then, you know, and it works, then he's going to do it again in most cases. Because a lot of times they're like, just always like, and then they would just, you know, cut me off and then just tell me how much they love me and miss me and I'm the greatest thing. And I'm like, okay, so at what point, it's like, at what point do you want to take their pattern for this is going to happen again and again? And I think that every time they do that, it's what you want to hear a lot of times. It's you know, in an insecure situation. So, go ahead.
Well, this is going back to the initial topic. Remember, I said there's a branch off. There's multiple layers here. The people that tend to be susceptible to love bombing the most tend to be the individuals that were neglected in childhood.
Okay.
And the reason for this is because as a child, if you're seeking the attention of mom and mom and dad, for whatever reason, don't provide that level of affection, children are very smart and they can break things down into multiple categories. Mm-hmm. One category is the avoidance side, where children just choose to suppress these emotional needs. But deep down inside, there's this child seeking validation. So this is why I say sometimes avoidance do love bomb, but the difference is once the trigger hits, they run for the hills. So they're very quick to open up, but then of course, as soon as they open, they're very quick to regress. Mm. The other aspect is that a child will be very selfless, very giving in order to compensate for that lack of support, the lack of affection. So what they tend to be is they tend to be people pleasers. And these are the types that tend to be most vulnerable when it comes to love bombing, because when you're dealing with someone who loves bombs as quickly as they do, and all of a sudden they're giving you this affection, what you're actually feeling as being the recipient of that is you're feeling all that love and neglect that you grew up without. So you feel at a subconscious level, okay, I'm going down the right path. I'm gratifying myself. I found that missing connection that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. The problem is later on in the relationship, does it stick? And if you're dealing with someone who's insecure, it probably will. But if you're dealing with someone as extreme as a narcissist or someone who's cluster B, you're going to be dealing with the love bombing that's followed by devaluation and then eventually followed by the discard, which can be incredibly detrimental to a person's psyche or their self-value. If someone goes from feeling loved to feeling devalued to feeling rejected and abandoned in a span of, several months, mm-hmm. That can lead to all different types of depression, suicidal tendencies, essentially what we call an existential crisis, where someone values who they are and what they believe, and they have completely dedicated themselves to this other person because of the love bombing. And this is where we get into Ross Rosenberg's interpretation of codependency, which is he's defined it as lack of self-love syndrome, which is essentially the result of a child that's been neglected. So the child tries to project through the adult a need to be loved. And as soon as they feel that love or affection in the form of love bombing, it can create a codependent relationship. And we know how most of those tend to mm-hmm. end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely a deep topic. And it's something that, it comes up a lot, and it sounds like if you haven't met someone that's treated you like that before, right? Because everyone's a little bit different. And I would say that, using the term love bombing, and then if you got specific, if you got really deep into this, it would be really interesting if they ever did a study, instead of just asking people questions, but actually knew the phrases that were being used in the love bomb. You know what I'm saying? The words, because certain words and statements trigger people more than others, right? So like, like you said, it's more than just saying I love you or you're beautiful. People that are very manipulative can find out what those things are and kind of push those buttons over and over again. And it seems like that seems to happen a lot. But I think the worst case is when someone, well, not the worst case, but the ones I've come across, is when someone's saying they just can't let them go. They know that they're lying. They know that they're not to be trusted. And it always comes back to that they're highly attracted to them, and they're highly physically attracted to them, and they have good intimacy. But they'll also add, this is the funny part, how they can't figure them out. And I've told a couple women, if you go into some books about attraction, this is something that's mystery and not knowing outcomes, a little bit of drama sometimes breeds more attraction, because they don't understand why. They're like, why can't I get this person out of my mind? Well, because you can't figure them out, right? No, I can't. That's the thing. It's the open loop.
Well, that's cat string theory. That's basically what pickup artists call cat string theory, which is basically if you give a cat a string and you just throw it at their paws, they eventually get bored of it and walk away. But if you leave it too far out and out of their reach, they also get bored and walk away. But if you leave it just out of reach, where the potential of potentially grabbing it is there, they go absolutely insane for it. And this is where, like, again, this is going back to the aspect of codependency. When you're dealing with someone who has cluster B personalities, so not all cluster Bs do this, but most of them do. What you're actually dealing with is someone who's mirroring your ideal partner. So if I am desperate, or not even desperate, if it's been a while since I've connected with someone, and then I connect with someone who seems to be mirroring all the characteristics I'm looking for in a partner, and then tells me, I love you, that can be incredibly intoxicating. So it's important for people that when they're in that whole limerence phase, and I'm dealing with people on my Discord going through the same thing right now, where they're like, oh, I've never met someone like this. They're absolutely amazing. And I keep telling them, tap the brakes. It doesn't happen this quickly. And if it does, you need to be incredibly cautious. I'm not saying that you need to eject. That's a dismissive mindset. But you need to be openly aware of what's happening in your environment and to make sure that the security that you're feeling is legitimate.
So what's an example of that?
An example of what feeling high levels of limerence?
No, I'm sorry. To be specific, when you said someone goes, oh, this person's wonderful, great, I'm so excited, and it's within 3 months, it's a short period of time. I believe that's what you mean, right? They're just getting to know someone. And then you're saying pump the brakes. What's an example of, how someone would go about pumping the brakes when things are going really good in their eyes?
I would say that's a very good question. It's very important for you not to lose your individuality.
Okay.
And I'm just as guilty of this, by the way. It's very easy for people, especially when they're high levels of limerence, to spend all of their free time with the other person. And it's important for you to have boundaries, to have your own sets of hobbies, your own sets of friends, if that's possible. But it's important to create that individuality above all else.
I guess it's because one of the reasons I asked that question is because when people start dating, I'm like, it should be really good. It should be good if you're going to continue to date someone. You shouldn't start out a relationship with drama, or people look back, oh, I should have known when this happened in the first month or second month, and good relationships should start out good. So I don't know if I always recommend, be careful because it's really good right now that you might be off. But I see what you're saying there where, make sure you're doing your other things, because this is a common thing when people have been married for 5 years plus, which I qualify as a long relationship now. They'll go, God, I stopped hanging out with my friends. I stopped, playing ball. I stopped, you know what I mean? I stopped boxing, right? They all say it. They got comfortable. And then when they're in the middle of a breakup, they realize that, they've put a lot into this. And so, it's hard. It's hard for them, and they're more attached because they made them the center. But I see what you mean. I guess when you first start dating, though, someone and you're excited about them, it's kind of hard to pump the brakes, I suppose. But that's why I was curious specifically, how someone could do that right away, because it's exciting if you meet someone and it goes right. In my own life, I would say though that I've always been someone that does that pretty well, not trying to do it. So, you always think, before I did what I did do, you always think everyone does the same thing. Isn't everyone like this?
Yep.
And then you hear everyone's story and you're like, oh shit, really? You did that? Oh, okay. And it's just, everyone has their own little past to it. But a lot of it has to do too with, being, especially these people that are in their 20s. I repeatedly tell them, like, give yourself a break. If you had a bad relationship or you made a bad choice, like, give yourself some credit. Well, now I know I would. I'm like, of course you know now. But this idea of you messed up or you fucked up, you've never met someone like this before. This isn't. There's nothing that could have prepared you for this. There's no class or book you could have took, because, by the way, when you're in your 20s, you don't really want to read a book on relationships, because you're just like, oh, I just go out on dates.
I was about to tell you, there's several books about that, but they never want to read them until they've had their heart broken.
It's like sometimes even now I'll be like, oh, this is a really good book. And I say, the great thing is now, I get it if you don't like to read, get the Audible book, or look up the author and see him interviewed or her interviewed. You can see him on a podcast. There's so much content now, right? Or I don't think it's as effective, but book notes are quite good sometimes, and you could find those that are basically like modern Cliff Notes. I'm gonna have those on my website coming up where you can use those. But really, these books that we recommend and different things, they don't really have value until you need them.
This is true,
right? It's like water tastes really good when you're thirsty. You know what I mean? It's like that's when people go, oh shit, they're talking about me. It's like, oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen Eddie Murphy Raw, where he talks about the cracker. Like, if you were starving and someone gave you a cracker, you would be like, that's the best cracker ever.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing with water. Like I said, if you've ever worked out or you're low on water or you're in the tropics like I am and you have just a bottle of plastic bottled water, it's like glorious. It's like, oh, God.
Yes.
How could you drink anything else, You don't want a cola or anything like that. So it's like I said, people sometimes don't want it because they don't think they need it. And then, even then, I'm finding that people just have their guard up against, I don't want to read a book. And like I said, like now we have options that are alternatives if you don't like reading. So.
Well, the other aspect is that when you're dealing with people who are highly anxious, and you seem to get a lot of clientele that way, and I used to get a lot of clientele when I was still coaching, but a lot of them are hoping to get a mirrored response. They're hoping for you to just repeat what they think back to them. And unfortunately, and I'm not throwing you under the bus, but I will throw many other coaches under the bus. There are people out there that do that if it means a paycheck.
Okay.
So it's a case where, like, we talked about this on my Discord the other day. There seems to be a surplus of coaches now. I think that has largely to do with the pandemic.
There's more. There's just more people on YouTube this last year. It's just really got flooded. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, it's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm all for diversity of the pool. Like, if people want to give different perspectives and they're good at it, great. But there are people out there that will tell you can get your ex back if it means that you're going to pay them $2,000. And it's sad. It's really sad. And it's in the case of love bombing, going back to the initial branches that we talked about. When you're dealing with someone who's in a codependent relationship, we're talking about a clinical codependent relationship where there's literally an abuser and a recipient of the abuse, and their entire identity is founded on the interaction between them, where both individuals have completely enmeshed themselves in this unified identity. And you remove that from the equation if you take a parasite and you remove it from its host, that parasite will die, with one exception, that you introduce them to a new host. And this is what cluster B tends to do. Now, unfortunately, the person that was previously the host that had this parasite removed has now become dependent on that parasite. So what you deal with is a high level of withdrawal. Now, the host is not going to die without the parasite, but the narcissist without the supply will die, either through an exacerbation of resources or most commonly suicide, because they cannot identify without having someone present. That's the unique aspect of love bombing. Love bombing isn't a trick. They legitimately feel it, with one exception, and those tend to be the covert narcissists that are self-aware that they happen to be narcissistic and know fully well what they're doing. In my opinion, probably the most dangerous type.
It's funny because I was just saying yesterday in a coaching session that this might be a little bit off what you were saying, but I think it lines up in some ways. I said there's a lot of dangers, whether it's love bombing or let's say a covert narcissist, let's just say a toxic relationship. We could put that umbrella on it, but you broke up for a reason, okay? And this is what people lose track of when they're lonely. And I'm compassionate about that, right? Comment about. She's like, Mac doesn't just say what I want to hear. It pisses me off, LOL, because we've done a couple live coaching sessions. And it's like, I was just saying yesterday, I said, look, she's still in contact with her ex, right? She knows that they kind of had this off and on bad toxic relationship, but she's done some things at work. He's done some things, but they kind of stayed in contact. They meet up casually. And my approach is this. I don't ever want to tell you you can't do nothing as an adult. Like, you can't do that. Let's talk about why you want to do that. Let's talk about the consequences. Let's talk about why you really want to do that. What's your real intentions, or, you know what I mean? Because you're chasing something. Let's be honest. It doesn't seem like a very good match long term, right? Like, if you broke up within 1 year and had repeated fights, it's probably not going to change much, unless it was specifically alcohol. They did rehab. You know what I mean? If it's very specific and they made the things happen. But if it went really bad in year one, but you stay in contact, is what I was saying, someone's going to get left holding the bag. And what I mean by that is you get these casual talks, you flirt still, maybe you hook up on occasion, on a drunk night. You're keeping the door open. You're being dishonest that you kind of want them back, but you want them to work for it. Then out of nowhere, they meet someone and stop talking to you. That's crushing. That's crushing. I was just saying yesterday, I was like, look, you're going to get left holding the bag. And I think this happens a lot in these relationships with love bombing and narcissistic relationships where people, they even though they know the person's bad or the relationship's not great, they're still so attracted to them that they'll meet them and do things with them and whatnot. I'm like, look out, because I'm relating this to your parasite thing. If they find someone else that can fill that void, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's done. They're not going to keep you on unless that other person, leaves them or whatnot. And it's a bad fall when you've stayed in contact with your ex and you think, you hope, you wish that it's going to somehow work out, and then all of a sudden they're seeing someone else or with someone else. That's hurt. That's like, oh shit.
You know what the most requested video on my channel is right now?
What's that?
Or the topic? Monkey branching. People are obsessed with that. And I can understand why, but you also have to take the mindset of the dumpy in these situations, especially if you've been replaced by someone else. Like, narcissism aside, let's shove it aside. If you have been the victim of a monkey branch, it's incredibly painful. for a couple of reasons. One, you feel abandoned, but two, you feel insufficient, which I would say could probably be even worse for your self-development, because it'd be one thing if you ended a relationship with someone and you can look at them and say, you know what, they've had their flaws, and they ended the things knowing fully well that they were going to hurt me, but at least they were honest and they decided to move on their life without me. And you can kind of respect them for that at the end. But if you've been replaced, that's a case where it's not necessarily they didn't think that they couldn't make it work with you. It's that they felt they could do better with someone else. And that's where the ego takes a huge hit. And this is why discards, when it comes to narcissism, are so painful, because a narcissist will not end a relationship with you unless they have someone else lined up. Because their foundation, how they see themselves, is incorporated into someone else. They cannot, for long periods of time, be single. They will literally commit suicide.
That's deep. I mean, I think that the monkey branching thing is, you can use that term, but yeah, it hurts in the sense that, especially if someone doesn't see it coming, it came out of nowhere. And then the goddamn internet now with the social media, you can go do research on the person, right? Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, cause some of this stuff, right? Like some of these dynamics, monkey branching, cheating, some other things, it doesn't make them right, doesn't make them less painful, but they've been going on for a long time with human beings. Like this has happened probably in, tribes and the Romans and whatever. Okay. Some of this stuff.
Well, how many wives did King Edward end up
right.
beheading
So
to literally marry someone else?
Right. So this isn't but then you can go get a background through pictures and comments. I mean, that's tough. When people come to me and they know all these things about their ex's new partner, I'm like, how do you know this? Like, that's my question. I'm like, where did you get this? Well, I kind of looked on this. I'm like, just stop doing that. It's because it's so, you don't want to know. That's the one, even if you have an ex that you broke up with in a pretty good way, or, as best as you could, and you still have feelings for them, you just don't want to know certain intimate details, and you don't want to know who they're seeing if you can help it, is what I want to say. And you definitely, if you run into something by accident, you just got to say, like, treat it like crack cocaine. Don't try it. You know what I mean? Don't fucking.
It's an interesting analogy, man.
Yeah, it's like when I was younger. I remember I was talking to someone and smoked some pot. I smoked pot before, whatever, and I drank, but I've never gotten into anything hard. And this guy was like, "You've never tried crack?" And I'm like, "Whoa, you've done crack before?" It's like we're not even gonna hang out again. It's like, what is this? Did you never wanted to try it? Hell no. Hell no. Luckily I saw New Jack City at about 9 years old. That was enough for me. I was, I've never even come across it, right? I've seen it, but I'm saying, like, I would say I don't know stats and all that shit on crack cocaine or some of these drugs that are highly addictive, right? But I would say checking your ex's profile or who they're dating has got to be one of the most addicting things for some people post breakup. Because I mean, it's endless, right?
You know what the worst one is? The worst one is when you're purposely trying to avoid their profile and your friends and family reach out to you and say, "Oh, I saw them with so and so," or
I've had that happen. I've had that happen, and I'm like, I don't.
Dude, I still have that happen. I've literally had to tell people that are close to me, "Don't tell me about my ex. I don't really give two shits about her." Please don't want to.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially if it's like, oh, she was looking really good. Oh, thanks. That's great.
Dude, you know how many times I've gotten that comment? It's like, your ex looking good. I'm like, can you
taking highly
up?
Provocative pictures. Oh, thanks. Cheers. That's great. Anything else? Did you have anything else for me? What was your intention? Oh, I just want to let you know. Oh, sure. How's your life?
Yeah.
You know, how's your... That's funny. I mean, it's just the way it is now, though, right? I don't think people are purposely doing it. I think that's just the stream of information now. That it's like I've talked about it before with you. Like, there's gonna be rehabs for fucking social media, dude. There's gonna be.
Honestly,
there's already should be.
I think in the next 5 years we're definitely going to see some laws passed because, like, it's getting ridiculous. Like, even when it comes to something as simple as a vaccine, like, people are coming out and saying now that the vaccine makes you metallic. And it's just like, are you kidding me? Like,
what does that
like,
mean?
at what point did we cross that line into insanity?
What do you mean it makes you metallic?
So the new conspiracy theory is that apparently the
magnet thing,
COVID vaccine, yeah, the magnet thing. Okay. Apparently it magnetizes you, so it causes like keys to stick to people, and people are like literally doing it online, saying, "Oh, look, my keys are sticking to me," not knowing fully well it's probably their sweat that's keeping, the key stuck to them. But all of a sudden, there's this aspect of people questioning the reality, which. To certain authors' credits, was kind of predicted about 20 years ago. With the creation of technology will come a generation of undereducated individuals that will question everything.
Well,
which is kind of fun.
The thing that gets me is there's so much information. Everyone thinks they're a genius now. Everyone thinks they're an expert. They're they read an article on such and such thing and they know it all, or they watched a video on such and such and they it's like that statement I said. I'm watching that Michael Malice, Jordan Peterson. I wouldn't call it. It wasn't an interview. I mean, they were debating some topics, talking about some things, and I don't know Michael Malice's body of work that good. I've seen him. He obviously has a following because he's been on Joe Rogan and some other things, right? And Jordan Peterson's name to have him on his show, but like some of the things the guy was saying. Like, I'm an anarchist. I'm like, okay, that's extreme. And Jordan Peterson's, being diplomatic about. It's so funny because Jordan Peterson, like, I don't mean to. This is one of those things that everyone does. Me too. I don't mean to be negative. Yes, you do. Yes, you know what I mean? Like, when someone declares they're not meaning it in a certain way, they're saying, I actually feel negative, but I want to be nice. So when Michael Malice is like, no, I'm an anarchist, and he's like, oh yeah, okay, and then he's like, no, I believe that everything should be this way, and Jordan Peterson's like, well, let's unpack this and go into it, and sometimes you're just like, it's like, I don't even want to bring this topic. Do you really think that anarchy could work in the world?
I think this is where my poli-sci hat comes on. I put anarchy and nihilism in the same category. By stating that you're an nihilist or an anarchist, you have become a talking paradox.
But the question I have, do you think it would be even possible to put in play in the world?
In small doses and in small environments, yes. I mean, in large environments, no.
I just think it's completely unrealistic. It's one thing to feel that way as an individual, like, oh, that's what I want. It's like another thing to go, really? You think? Go ahead.
Well, sorry for interrupting. What most people don't realize is that communism is a form of anarchy in its definition. Because what people usually confuse communism with is socialism. So when people say you're a communist, most people think government-owned states, kind of like what they had in Russia. That's not what communism is. Communism was the final transition of socialism, which is basically the ideal that you start off by the government running everything, and then eventually you're supposed to dismantle the government and become an anarchical state where basically there's no government authority anymore and things just work with the cooperation of the populace and money doesn't exist. And what keeps the society running is this aspect of collaborative cooperation without needing a government body. It's actually quite a beautiful theory. But in practice, it never works. And why does it never work? Because people are selfish.
Okay.
And this is where Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna give you that. Okay, so everyone has their own experiences, right? And so everyone relates things. Like Jordan Peterson was relating different things to children and teaching. You know what I mean? Because that's his expert. That's what he has experience in, right? So
Yeah.
like Michael Malice, he's going on about I believe everyone it could work and this and that and I'm just saying, So it was funny because Jordan Peterson made this reference of if you get 10 kids together playing a game, I forgot how Jordan Peterson said it. But basically, like, they need to know the set of rules they're playing by. They need to know this. And Michael Mouse is like, no, they don't. If I want to play my own game, I should be able to play my own game, such and such, right? So let me just give you, like, I was a teacher for about a year and a half at a charity here, almost 2 years. And I taught kindergarten P1, which is first grade, basically first grade, second grade, third grade, for like each class about 2 or 3 hours a week. It was like 25 hours. Extremely good birth control. So, so I like kids. I like kids. I'm good with kids and all that stuff, but I haven't experienced something like this, let alone kids that are they don't speak English. It was a life experience, right? Okay, so the P1, the first grade, the kindergarten, I'm the teacher that's like, I want these kids to have fun sometimes, right? Okay, so I'm a player's coach. I'm one of the teachers that wants to be one of the cool teachers. I want you guys to have fun. So I give you fucking free time. It's like we get done with something, 10 minutes of free time to do whatever you guys want. So there is a basket of balls, and when I say balls, a lot of people think different things, but I'm talking about if you can get your eyes around, Chuck E. Cheese has those balls that kids jump in, those plastic. Maybe Chuck E. Cheese is a. Do you know those? When kids jump into a ball pit of some sort with plastic balls? Yeah. Okay, I didn't know how to describe that. I was just thinking Chuck E. Cheese. So, anyways, they're plastic. They're fine. So I'm like, I'll have them. They can throw the balls around and play catch and do. Just be a little crazy. It's fine. And I'd have a ruler and I'd hit the ball. I'd be like I'm a batter and I'd hit the ball and we could just have some fun. If you gave them clutch, if you gave these kids an extra. If you got to the point of 10 minutes, within the 10-minute mark, the weakest kid in the class would start to get pummeled by like 5 kids with the balls. It was just like, what are you guys doing? And they'd be like, what? And it's just human. It's just human that this, and someone would be like, oh, well, that's wrong. It's like any group that you just gave them extreme freedom to do whatever they want. It just takes one ringleader in the group to start picking on the weak kid, or they would just jump on the kid and wrestle. Wrestle with them to the point where you're like, "What are you guys doing? He can't breathe." It's like, what's going on here? These are little humans. It's like, do you know what I mean? And someone would be like, "Oh, this is a bad class." No, I've had 10 years of experience with large groups of classes and different people, and it's a lot to learn from just how humans act with each other in groups. And anarchy, to me, like, good luck. I mean, you think when you make that statement, you're like, oh, everyone will do what I do. No, they won't. No, they won't. No, they won't.
Historically speaking, whenever anyone's tried it, it's always ended disastrously. And this goes back to the aspect of the human psyche, or I'd say the collective human psyche. So human beings in small groups can collaborate and can create a society like this. But as soon as you get anything larger than 30 people, it becomes incredibly unstable. Like, you need hierarchy. Human beings need hierarchy to survive.
That's like, I'm an anarchist. I'm like, okay, that's never going to happen, dude. It'll never happen.
Well,
it'll never happen.
Well, this is why I say, I call this a paradox, because like the idea is, like, if you were truly an anarchist, you don't need to tell me. That's literally a counter definition of what anarchy is supposed to stand for. It's just like, okay, well, you're a living, breathing paradox. You have just proven by telling me that you're an anarchist why anarchism can never work. Because the idea is that you're supposed to be this selfless giving machine without having, any emotional motives or interactions, which is completely insane. It's never going to happen.
It's like that's what was going through my head. I'm like, but here's the other part that got me. Like I said, a lot of his arguments are very intelligent. He's humorous. He seems like he's well read. He uses a lot of big words. He's got a big vocabulary. I mean, some of the things. But then when he did the anarchist thing, right, and he insisted on it, right, because it was almost like Jordan Peterson gave him a couple outs to kind of reframe what he was kind of saying, and he was like, "No, I'm an anarchist," and I thought, this is headline. This is controversial, and this is why you're getting interviews like this, because it riles people up. And it's kind of funny because he was talking about other people doing the same thing. And so it's like, look at me, I'm talking about him today. But like in my head, I'm like, dude, it's just not realistic to think that and like I said, I was a little triggered by the fact I'm biased. He made a comment that was just blown over about teachers being, we put these kids in schools with mediocre figures at the head of the class, and I'm just like, you're gonna generalize that every teacher is a mediocre? That's rich. That is like, and you got this platform to talk like that, right? There's gonna be people that are young that'll go, yeah, that's so true, like that's a fucked up statement to say about people in school, like teachers in schools. Like that they're just these mediocre characters teaching people. I'm like, right? Obviously, I'm biased.
I think,
but
there isn't enough emphasis being put on humility.
Good point.
The aspect of understanding one's lack of knowledge and lack of understanding.
Yep.
Like one of my favorite quotes is Socrates, which he says, "All I know is that I know nothing," which has a very deep impact. And this is why I usually encourage people to look into philosophy, because it's not that I expect people to be like, oh, is this apple here or is it really not here? It's a case of me understanding what my limitations are. So on my channel, and I've mentioned on your channel too, I'm very careful with the stuff I consider I know. I usually say, this is my interpretation, this is my perspective. And it's not that I can't defend that argument. I definitely can. But I've also learned that anything I consider a belief, or anything that I consider in absolutes, like these guys do on these channels, talking about communism, anarchism, or whatever isms you want to throw. Right now, the big one now is this whole social justice warrior thing. Mm-hmm. If I am going to talk about this in an extreme with no flexibility, with no understanding, without seeing at the very least what the other side has to say about it, I'm not going to learn anything. And I'm not going to develop as a human being. And it's that mindset that causes things like anarchism to not work, because you can't have that level of inflexibility through cooperation. Now, the external element that we have in society today is something that we call capital, money. I can motivate you to do something you don't want to do if I can give you a little bit of money associated with it, or a little bit of power, if we want to really talk about the social dynamics of things. But the element is, if you have no incentives to do something, what is your likelihood to do something? I'm a charitable person, but I'm not going to be a charity every single day.
Good point.
I have my limits.
Good point.
So understand what your limits are. And this is where I find platforms like YouTube gives the mic to maybe the wrong kind of person who says, this is how it has to be. Your absolute is your attachment style, and you do not deviate from this. And this is the ultimate extreme. No, that's not how it works.
I'm just thinking of, because, YouTube kind of has some of these ads on YouTube are like infomercial type ads almost. And one of them was, I don't know if she's a coach or if she works, which group she works with, but she has this commercial that I've seen a couple times, and she goes into the attachment theory. And she's like, I'm going to tell you about the most important thing you need to know about your partner. It's called attachment theory. Everyone has one. And she goes into it. I'm just like, oh, God. So she's just, she's an immediate expert with credibility because she's read about attachment theory. And that, the style of it's like she's reading off a teleprompter. Do you know what I mean? There's no emotion. There's no improvising. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, so to me, that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, okay, like, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that if you want to apply that, but it's definitely not the only rule. You know, like that's not one thing to go on. If you can go on other things, because the thing about attachment theory, someone invented that. It's a theory. Me and you can create our own theory too, Clutch. We can come up with attachment theory 3.0 and call it different names. We can create different boxes. We can come up with new research. So it's like
the funny part is we probably will come up with new research as time progresses.
Well, it's interesting because some of the some of the stuff right now that we're referring back to, you know, from some of the great psychologists and different things, people aren't adapting things. It's like you still have, you still have some of what Freud did, and I'm not an expert on Freud. I've read Civilization and Its Discontents, and like some other things, but it's a theory of how things are working, and people look at it as like, oh, he had it all right, or he's a genius, he's this. He had a lot wrong, I think. It's a way different world than some of the things that we're following from 100 years ago. Like, things have transpired so quickly in the last 15 to 20 years because of the internet. It's so different now. There's so many different problems.
Freud was a brilliant man. He opened up the world of psychology to many, many people, but let's not be frank. He was clearly a man that had huge amount of repressed sexual eagerness in the fact that he sexualized everything. Like, don't get me wrong, the elements of human beings are to survive and replicate. Those are main functions of life. But we have grown beyond that, where we're the only species on our planet that we're aware of that can actually analyze our environments and rationalize a certain conclusion. Animals don't tend to do that. Animals tend to be very cause and effect. This is the reason, and this is my absolute. This is why it's so hard to find a missing cat, not using my situation. So those situations are very unique in the sense that we have the ability to look at things with retrospect, use our memories, and come to conclusions. This is why we say things like no contact, because we want to eventually revisit this experience, or at the very least, we want to revisit what our interpretation of the experience was to come to a conclusion. This relationship didn't work, going back to our original topic, because it was highly codependent, or because I was love bombed, or because my ex was a narcissist, or whatever interpretation you have thrown out there, whatever it happens to be. The idea is not for you to be absolute and say this person was a narcissist and, they were just terrible. You're never going to be 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure that my ex-fiance was a narcissist. I have a pretty good idea that she probably was, based on what I'm seeing. But what I can conclude was, well, regardless of what she was, I can conclude that based on my experience and my collective memory, at least what I can recall, this was a toxic experience. I need to make sure to control what aspects I have control over, such as love bombing. If I happen to see it early on, I'm running for the hills. If I happen to see boundary breaking activities early on in the relationship that I don't agree with, I'm going to be running for the hills. The idea is that this experience taught me something about myself. And this is where we get into this whole philosophical aspect of relationships, or at least what we try to talk about, which is every relationship is an excuse to discover a part of yourself. Regardless of whether or not you hate this person now or not, you were attracted to this person for a particular reason at the moment. You need to discover what that reason is, because that aspect of you is probably something you've neglected, and that's why you're attracted to it.
And like the topic yesterday of, if you had the opportunity to do a review of your relationship, like the life review idea, if you died for 20 minutes, how would it look? It's kind of I thought about giving people some directions, because to go against the anarchist statement, a lot of people like directions and protocols. Of if you were to look back at your relationship and timeline it and really think about how many, like if you look at it from the beginning to the end, a lot of times you're just cherry picking feelings, not events even sometimes. Just the feeling of not wanting to be lonely. But when you look at the whole body of the relationship, you're like, oh shit. Like I have to get back to why we broke up. Like we were really bad or this was not good.
Well, what most people don't realize is that your memories aren't 100% tangible.
Yes, it's true.
And what I mean by that is what you remember isn't necessarily what happens.
Yep.
And vice versa. And going back to your being emotionally driven, our brains rationalize and build memories based on how we feel.
Yep.
So this is why it's incredibly hard to get it back together with an ex, especially if your ex happens to be a woman, because women tend to be emotional creatures. They will remember themselves feeling bad, and they will only remember the terrible memories.
Right. I mean, what you said, I've read up on that before. And I think that's a chapter in Subtle Art of Not Giving Fuck. Mark Manson doesn't go into detail, but he has a chapter on that it's pretty compelling what he brings up. Which was basically a case where someone was seeing a psychiatrist of some sort or a therapist, and the therapist got them to believe that they were sexually molested when they were a kid. This is how it's portrayed in the chapter. I might be getting this wrong. And they basically accused a relative of some sort of molesting him, and it came out later on that it never happened, but that this therapist was kind of pushing him in that direction, and they had made this memory. They had made this memory up, and so yeah, you're right. There's I've read up on that before, that your memories aren't 100% true, that they are shaped around your feelings, and then hence me who considers myself someone that has a very good memory, right? Especially for words and numbers, but from what people tell me, it's amazing how many times, if you're like that, where you'll be around a friend, family, or colleague, and they'll retell the story, and you're like, that's different than you said before. Like in the back of your head, you're like, you didn't tell it that way before. Now I don't think you're telling the truth. It's like
well, this is the thing with pathological liars, right? Like a lot of them aren't even aware that they're lying.
Yeah.
So this is where we have to be incredibly careful, and this kind of touches on that aspect of narcissism as well. With the exception of the covert, most cluster Bs aren't aware, at least if they haven't had the experience, they aren't aware that what they're doing is malicious. So it's not a case where you're dealing with someone who's just like, pulling strings behind a black curtain and like has an evil grin on their face. It's a case where you're probably, in an essence, dealing with a child who is trying to build a loving connection and doesn't know how.
I think going back to that live stream that I did with you and on your channel, and then we were talking about narcissism and stuff, and I kind of brought up the idea that society and the content that's out right now has fed people to be more like this, that society as a whole has made people more selfish, that the music, like I think I'm this might be redundant, but music, if you look at the music from like the 1950s, if I'm in the car listening to music from my mom's Cyrus station or whatever the hell she gets her music from, that's not, I don't know where she gets it from, but it's, when I'm home, it's like 1950s, maybe early 60s. It's such a happier type of music.
I'm going to be critical of that because there's always been music that's been around that has been inherently selfish. Like, have you ever heard Runaway Sue?
Yeah.
From the 1950s.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it's literally a song about a girl that slept with the entire neighborhood.
Well, what about
what
about Black Betty? Have you heard that song?
Oh, yeah, of course. It's same principle, but there's a unique difference now. Back then, it was sort of written with a humorous undertone to it. Now, it's legitimately, fuck bitches, get rich.
Yeah, that's what I get your point, but it is different, right? It's more extreme.
Yeah.
It's more extreme.
Well, let's take hip hop for example, because I grew up on hip hop. I'm pretty
Me
sure you
too.
did as well.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah.
Grew up in the Bay Area.
I
for sure.
remember, I remember the '90s. Run DMC, NWA. Say what you want about the lyrics, it had a unique message to it. We are being repressed. There is a huge level of inequality. We're going to sing about it using our own words with our limited vocabulary. Cool. That's perfectly fine. And then somewhere around the 2000s, I usually blame this with Nelly, but I know Nelly wasn't the cause of this, but this is where I started noticing the transition. Around the time when Nelly came out, all of a sudden, hip hop did a switch where it stopped being about, traumatic events and stopped being about the inequalities in society. And it started being more about glorified materialism. Look at how much money I'm making.
You don't have to explain it to me. Yeah. You don't know.
Yeah.
And I still listen to it. Not as much, but I'm way more cognizant of like, God, these are bad messages for young people. You know what I mean? I'm listening to it like at the gym. Right? It is. Even, and I'll go this far because I still listen to like some NWA or some old school rap. And like, I'm like, God, this is, because here's that thing that you just said about, oh yeah, it's, being oppressed. There's NWA and I smack that bitch. Like they're talking about hitting women. They're talking about, like that's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, right? Like there's all these messages, but I listen to it. I enjoy the beats. I enjoy the rhythm, but I notice the words now and I'm like, damn. Like what you just said about Run Around Sue. It's a little bit more humorous and softer, but I know what you mean. I think it's just more
part of the aspect. Part of the aspect, Mac, is that we're just getting old.
Yeah, that's what I know. That's what I know. I'm like, holy shit. I'm starting to notice this stuff, and this reminds me of like when I was a fucking kid, and my mom was like, "Oh, you can't buy that cassette. It's parental advisory." I mean, I was around when cassettes were parental advisory, and there was a group called Digital Underground. Maybe you don't know who they are, but they like Tupac kind of came up with them. And their name of their album was Sex Packets, and like I was like 8, and I was like, I want this. This is the coolest song right now. My mom's like, what? It's like 8 years old, It's like now, I just think that going back to what you said though, I think that the narcissism and the more people like this has to do not only with that music, but also just the inflated amount of ads of how to get rich. I mean, how to get it gets me sometimes. I'm like, yeah, that looks good. I'm not a materialistic person in that way, but sometimes I'm like, that would be great. But it's just it's bombarded, right? It's bombarded.
Well, it's definitely encouraged, and more importantly, it's glorified. So all of a sudden, it's cool to be a selfish prick versus 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yep, I agree with you. I mean, it's what you said was true. It's glorified, and then in these songs, which music can be hypnotic. So if you listen to music, it can start to program you to want to be that person. What I find really interesting that people don't talk about is the level of belief people have in movie stars and some of these hip hop stars that they really are like this. The reality is most of them, I won't say all of them, they're actors. They're actresses. They're like, if you watch the Academy Awards, right? I haven't watched it in years. I mean, I can care less now. The drama going into the Academy Awards is like crying and all. These people are playing fake roles. They weren't really in the shit. They weren't in a war, and it's like, oh my God, it's like I wonder what Native Americans would think about like society and going like, you're glorifying someone that faked a story, and you somehow, you don't know it, but you think like Leonardo DiCaprio actually did that shit in the movie. You're like, oh, I loved Leonardo DiCaprio. He didn't do it. It was all fake. It was all made up. It was all made up, Clutch. It was all a hoax. Oh, no, it's a really good movie. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio is a fake, a career fake. No, he's not. Think about it. Think about it. You can call it art, you can call it creativity, but when we watch those Academy Awards, you're like, oh my God, best supporting actress. Oh my, he was wonderful in that film. It's fake. And then you go to music. A lot of it's fake. How about the amount of rappers that became actors? Not very good ones, by the way. If you've ever seen a movie with 50 Cent, it's like, oh my God. Like, this isn't fair that this person's allowed to make movies. You know, it's like...
Well, I don't know. I personally liked 8 Mile.
They're actors. So I'm just saying, like, there's so many things in society where we would accuse someone of being fake as a negative thing, as a bad thing, as I gotcha. You're full of shit, right? You're full of total shit. But when we look at it, a lot of our heroes or people we look up to, we're looking up to them in fake roles. I don't think that's ever broken down. Like, it's like someone will be like, oh, I love Denzel Washington. Do you really know him? Or do you think like he's the same person from Training Day? You know what I mean? It's like,
it's true.
It's like these are the people that we're and then like, I'm a big person on sports, right? It's like, this guy's really great at basketball, so he gets a platform, people look up to him. Is he really a good person? I don't know.
Do you remember when Joe Pesci released his like rap song?
No.
He
I like Joe Pesci.
I think it was like in the two. Oh, I love him as an actor, but this rap song was so cringy. It was him like just whispering that he's a wise guy. He's like, I'm a wise guy.
What? Was it part of a movie?
Yeah. No, it was legitimately a music video that he released. He released a rap song.
Well, that just goes to show you how like it's bad now. I don't know if it's a sign of me getting older or just having more real conversations with real people rather than, because I find myself, since I've been a coach, I don't watch movies or watch series as much. It's just too fictional. It's just too fictional. I don't know what it's related to.
I'm seeing all the people that Rob is mentioning. Mark Wahlberg was Marky Mark, Rob. Just FYI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good Vibrations. I remember that shit. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
now he's an outstanding actor, right? It's like,
well, it depends what you mean by outstanding.
Well, I mean, he's highly successful. We'll put it that way. He gets in a lot of movies. I would say he's a pretty good actor because he's played a lot of different roles. I'll give him that.
Sure.
So you give him that, but it's just amazing when you really think about it. That, and I went, you go back and you watch these movies that are based on true stories, especially ones that are war based. It's like, really, come on, man. You know what I mean? It's like some of this stuff. And people gobble it up. And now we got the most popular thing is Marvel Comics. Like, that's the most popular type of movie.
That's the ultimate fantasy, dude. Like, how many people fantasize being as kids, especially when they're repressed?
Right.
Of having superpowers. Like, that's why people relate to Captain America so much. He's the stereotypical weak person that becomes strong.
Well, yeah, it's the archetype. It's Carl Jung and all that other stuff. But I'm saying, like, like I said, it's just what's gone on with the worshiping of some of these people you don't know that well, being great beings. It's bad. Mm-hmm. It's created some more narcissism too. Like I said, I'm on a tangent now. Who's Donald Glover? Rob, who's Donald Glover? You mean Danny Glover?
Is from he's from the show Community originally.
Oh, okay. I don't know who that is.
He was a comedian / actor. He was also in he was in Spider-Man: Homecoming. He played a scene in there. I'm not sure what other movies he's done. But he's, in my opinion, he's a really talented actor / music person.
Okay.
Yeah, I like him though. But what was I gonna say? I had an idea that I was gonna spin. The idea was this. Usually, when we see these transitions, and we usually see them every 10 to 20 years, what you get is you get a societal shift, and the societal shift comes in two forms, in my opinion. The first form is that of comedy. So comedy is usually a forefront of what is going to be acceptable in 10 to 20 years and what is going to be shunned in 10 to 20 years. So you think of like Russell Peters 10 years ago, bringing up the other stereotypes of racism. And all of a sudden, now we've had an overcompensation for it. And right now, what's happening in comedy is this anti-social justice warrior, anti-PC movement. So you're getting a societal pushback against the overcompensation, which is the natural balance of things. It starts off that way. The second thing that tends to show a transition is music. So music is a funny thing in the sense that usually it's a form of communication that expresses frustration. Usually that can do with love, it can do with societal injustice, it can do with, money or whatever have you. The idea is that what we're seeing in music now is we're seeing the exact opposite, which is we're seeing an over exaggeration and over glamorification, if that's even a word, of material abundance. And what you're going to start to see now is you're going to start to see music start mirroring what's happened in comedy, which is you're going to start talking about this overcompensation that's happened. I have a feeling that that's going to be the next transition in music. So society has this funny way of subtly communicating what's to come if you know what to look for. And the same thing goes for relationships, by the way. It's like, how many times have you and I talked about that subtle comment that your ex told you right before they broke up with you? Oh, I met a nice guy. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're lining the person up. It's a nice little subconscious hint. It's the same thing that we're seeing now.
Yeah.
So we're going to see a transition. It's going to get better. Right now, we're at the extreme where the Kardashians are being glorified and, it's cool to be a billionaire. And all of a sudden, the CEO from Amazon is going to space and, he's going to be number one when he can't even pay his workers a decent wage. This glorification of other glamorous people clearly needs to stop. And it's going to happen, but it's going to subtly happen through comedy and music. That's usually what happens.
I'll take your word for it. I hope so.
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm too optimistic, and maybe we're doomed to die alone.
Oh no! I'm more positive than I've ever been in my life. Not about the world necessarily, but just overall. You got to look at it glass half full. So that's just one of those tangents for me that I grew up watching every movie that you can think of, and recently I'm just like, God, have you ever thought about this? It's like, wow, it's like the stuff's all made up, and I don't know, So, anyways, I think it's time that we wrap this up. Thanks for coming on, Clutch. I appreciate your time, your expertise on the topic of love bombing.
We barely talked about it.
I know. This is how I am. Trust. I'm a conversationalist. That's what I would say I am. I'm a conversationalist. I can have a conversation with anyone for 2 hours. So don't feel special.
Oh, you are our PMing nightmare, dude. Project management nightmare. I deal with people like you all the time at work. It's like, we have to talk about this. Yes, but let's talk about this other subject and then this other subject. I'm like, we were originally here to talk about the construction of this bridge, not to talk about the construction of 6 other bridges like 6 months down the road.
All right, bud. Well, I'm glad you're doing well, and thanks for coming on. Everyone else that was on today, we had 15 on right now, 9 likes. We didn't get to the comments too much, but I know you guys were talking amongst yourselves. It's been a good one, and I appreciate it. Take it easy.
Yeah,
see you later,
no
Clutch.
problem. We'll talk later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.